like yesterday. So, you graduated from college in what year?
34.
34. And what did you do after college?
Well, obviously I got out and, to graduate, I took a bus ride. If you've never ridden a bus halfway across the country, I rode a bus to Kansas so that I could pick up my grandmother and grandfather and drive them east back to school so that they could be there for my graduation. This was the Bovard family.
Mm-hmm.
So after graduation, I probably within a couple of weeks, I went to work on the Great Lakes on a freighter for 2 months, and that was because I had interviewed and decided on Macy's, and for some reason I discovered later, of course the summer was sort of dull in the retail business, and their recruits came in the fall, so in September I reported to Macy's. I've forgotten, they have a fancy name for college graduates they recruited, and you were sort of a select group given special training courses and so forth. And I went to, and also part of the introduction to Macy's as an executive, you spent a month and a half as a sales clerk. And I was a sales clerk in the lamp department on the 7th floor of the Herald Square store. And when I went there in 1934, Macy's was one gigantic store downtown at 34th Street. And if you remember, Gimbel's was at 33rd Street, and the famous Macy-Gimbel rivalry. They each had one store, large store. Macy's was a basement and 9 floors, 10 floors altogether. So I was then made an executive, big deal, first stage, and was assigned to the drug department for Christmas, main floor, which was so crowded in those days that there were no suburban stores. You couldn't walk through the floor, the main floor, hardly. And come January, the personnel department called me and said, "Well, now you have to go back to being a sales clerk." And I said, in effect, in a pig's eye, you brought me in here under false pretenses under those circumstances. I'm an executive, and I expect to be one, and I expect to be promoted over a period of time, and that's what I'm here for. And that was the end of that. No more sales clerk conversation.
So we'll go back to Macy's in a sec, but what did Mary do when you went off to work on the steamboat?
Mary was working someplace in Philadelphia, I've forgotten where, and we didn't get married for a year. It was 1935 when we got married, and she was going to come to New York, and she was going to have a job, and we were going to be a 2-job family. And for one reason or another, she never went to work. She came to New York, and at that point, I had this apartment overlooking Riverside Drive at the George Washington Bridge area. and it was a nice place to live, and she soon made friends and a close friend right across the hall in this apartment building. And in any event, she never went back to work.
So you were engaged when you left college then?
Oh, I don't know that she had, I don't think she had a ring. I probably couldn't afford a ring, I know damn well I couldn't. When we engaged, I guess we had an understanding that we were going to get married.
So so it was a big deal to get a job in 1934, wasn't it?
Pardon?
It was a big deal to get a job in 1934.
Oh, believe me, it was right in the middle of the Depression. And actually, that was, I was interviewed by 3 or 4 people, and the home insurance company was interested in me. And thank heaven, I didn't even realize, I guess, that I probably would have been a salesman for them. And in any event, I paid not the slightest bit of attention about what I was going to do. I told you previously that my college days were probably the happiest days of my life, certainly up to that point. And I hadn't even thought about going to work. And all of a sudden, my college days are over. What am I going to do? How am I going to earn a buck?
So you went to work for Macy's, and you became an executive. That was immediately. That was in the fall, right after being a sales clerk for a month. And
Yeah.
then
Yes.
what happened over the next couple of years at Macy's?
Well, then I just went from one executive job. You know, I was a sales manager. No, you're in the executive ranks, but you're a sales manager, and you ran a department, and you had, depending on the size of the thing and whether you were on the main floor or the 7th floor way, you had 20 or 30 or 40 clerks to supervise, and you had a buyer, an assistant buyer, and you ran the floor operation, and the merchandising group ran the buying end of it.
And so through pretty much through the 30s, you ran a series of different departments?
Yeah. And that's really the story of Macy's going from, well, what you did was, what I did was I had a department to supervise, and then they had what they called a superintendent who was in charge of the fourth and fifth floors in my career start, and I was on the 4th floor. So then I became an assistant superintendent, then I became a superintendent, and then I became I was in the manager's office over all the floors, and then I became the manager of Macy's Herald Square, and so on, up the ladder to, that was my career. Yeah, and I remember being interviewed by, at that point, and there was a wave of having, in companies having, they weren't personnel directors, they were, what would you call somebody who was,
Human resources?
huh?
Human resources?
Yeah, that's not the word, but anyway. So she interviewed me, and of course, after I'd been there 6 months or a year or so, and I made all the wrong answers, in the sense that what I want to do in Macy's, well, you got to remember that that a merchandising operation is based on merchandising, okay?
Mhm.